There's a wind coming down off the ridge tonight that sounds like a man breathing through his teeth. My fire's holding steady, and I've got my back to the log the way you learn to sit when the cold means it. I want to tell you about a man they found up in the high country a long while back. Found him sitting straight up against a deadfall, hands near his knees, eyes open, frozen solid as the ground under him. And here's the thing that ought to reach into your chest and squeeze. His fire was still burning. Not out, not smoked down to a black smear. Burning. A live bed of coals throwing off heat not 3 feet from a dead man. He had wood stacked beside him. He had flame at his fingertips. And he froze to death anyway, sitting up like he was waiting on someone. Now let me say the thing that's going to sound wrong the first time you hear it, and true the second. A warm fire on a cold night has put more men in the frozen ground than the storm that drove them to build it ever did. I know how that lands. The fire's the thing that saves you. Everybody knows that. The fire's the friend. The storm's the enemy. And I'm telling you, the friend has killed more good woodsmen than the enemy ever managed. And it did it with a smile. And it did it while they thanked it. Stay with me, because once you see how, you will never sit down by a fire in the cold the same way again. I want to plant something in your mind, and I'm not going to explain it yet. I'm going to make you carry it, the way the old hands made me carry it, because a thing you have to hold on to sinks deeper than a thing handed to you soft. Here it is. How a warm man freezes. A warm man, not a cold one. Not a man caught out with no fire and no shelter, shivering himself blue. A warm man, sitting by good heat, wood to spare, flame at his feet, freezing to death, and never once knowing it's happening. Hold that. How a warm man freezes. I'll hand you the whole answer before the night's out. And when I do, it's going to lock into place so hard, you'll wonder how you never saw it. But not yet. Let me tell you who I am first, so you know I'm not building this out of stories I read somewhere warm. I've wintered alone in country where a mistake doesn't get corrected. It gets buried. I've run a line where the nearest stove was 2 days out, over ground that would kill you for hurrying. I've sat by my own fire on nights the cold came down like a hand, and I've felt the exact pull I'm about to warn you about. Felt it try to take me. And the only reason I'm talking to you now, instead of being a story somebody else tells, is that a man who buried 2 friends over this took me by the collar when I was young and stupid and made me understand it. He didn't read it in a book. He learned it the way all the true things get learned out here, which is by watching it take somebody, and by getting close enough to it himself to smell his own end on the wind. The first thing he beat into me is the thing you've got backward right now, sitting there listening. You believe, down deep where you don't even question it, that the fire is the answer to the cold. Build the fire, beat the cold. Simple. And I'm here to tell you the fire is not the answer to the cold. The fire is one tool for one part of the problem, and if you trust it to do the whole job, it will fail you at the exact moment you can least afford it, and it will fail you quietly, and it will fail you with a warm face turned toward you the whole time. Because here's what the fire does. It warms the side of you that's pointed at it. That's all. That's the whole of what an open fire can do. It throws heat in a line, and the side of you in that line gets warm, sometimes too warm, warm enough to lie to you. And the other side of you, the side turned out toward the dark and the wind and the deep cold sky, that side is bleeding heat the entire time, faster than the fire can ever put it back. The old hands had a way of saying it. Your face roasts while your back freezes. And they didn't mean it as a complaint about comfort. They meant it as a warning about death. Because a man split like that, hot on one side and cold on the other, feels warm. His warm side does all his thinking for him. His warm side tells his brain, we're fine, we're by the fire, we're saved. And his cold side, the side that's actually killing him, doesn't get a vote. Now sit close for this next piece, because if it doesn't land, the rest won't save you. When your body starts losing the fight against the cold, the very first thing to go is not your fingers, and it is not your toes. The first thing to go is your judgment. The cold reaches your thinking before it reaches anything you can see. A man getting cold in a way that'll kill him doesn't feel afraid. He feels calm. He feels sleepy. He feels warm sometimes, right near the end, warm enough to want to loosen his coat. And men have been found with their coats open and their shirts undone, dead in the snow, because the cold got into the part of them that decides things and told them a lie, and they believed it. That's the trap, baited and set. The fire warms your face, the cold takes your mind, and the two of them together whisper the same soft word, which is rest. Sit. You've done enough. Just rest here by the warm fire a while. That man they found sitting upright, you understand him now, or you're starting to. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't unprepared. He had fire. He had wood. He did every single thing you'd think a man ought to do. And he sat down by his good fire on the wrong ground with the wind at his back, and he got comfortable. And his front stayed warm and told him everything was fine, while his back and the ground beneath him drank the heat out of him like the earth was thirsty for it. And somewhere in there, his judgment went, quiet and painless. And he stopped feeding the situation the attention it needed. And he sat, and the warm side kept lying, and the man went out like a coal set on wet stone. Not because he had no fire, because he trusted the fire to do a job the fire was never able to do. Now, here's who knew and who died. And I want you to hear this part clean because it's the whole shape of the thing. The people who lived in the cold country for 1,000 winters running, the ones who were here long before anybody came through with a wagon and a book of rules, they hardly ever died this way. And it wasn't because they had better fire. It was because they never asked the fire to do the whole job in the first place. They knew a naked flame in open air was half a tool. They built to trap the heat, to bounce it back, to wrap it around a body instead of letting it stream off into a black sky that would take every bit you gave it and never give a thing back. The ones who died sitting up with their fires still burning were the newcomers. The trappers and the prospectors, and the men come out to make their fortune, who learned how to strike a fire and never learned the harder thing, which is what a fire cannot do for you and what you have to do for yourself. They copied the flame and skipped the knowing. And the knowing is the whole difference between a man who walks out in spring and a man they find in a sitting position when the snow goes off. I'm going to hand you the fix the same way it was handed to me, in layers, because the weight of it comes from the order, and the fix costs you nothing. That's the part that ought to make you angry once you see it. The thing that saves your life out here is free, and it's mostly the thing people won't be bothered to do. The labor they skip because the fire feels like enough on its own. But I'm getting ahead. Let me set the coals right, and I'll lay it out for you, piece by piece. Because the how a warm man freezes riddle isn't done with us yet, and neither is the night. Let me give you the first layer, and it's going to flip your whole head around the same way the rabbit thing does if you've heard me talk on that before. You do not build a fire to warm yourself. You build a fire to warm a space, and then you put yourself inside the warm space. Hear the difference, because it's everything. The man who freezes builds a fire and sits in front of it, offering himself to it like a man warming his hands at a store window. One side in, one side out, forever. The man who lives builds a fire so that its heat has nowhere to go but back onto him and around him. He does not stand in the open and face the flame. He makes the flame's heat get trapped and folded back. And the difference between those two men, given the same wood and the same match and the same cruel night, is that one of them is alive at dawn, and one of them is a story I tell by a fire of my own. That's the reversal. Stop asking the fire to heat you. Start using the fire to heat a place. And get in the place. Everything else I'm going to tell you is just how you build the place. Second layer. And this is the part the modern man throws away without even knowing he's throwing it away. Because to him, it's not a thing you'd keep in the first place. The ground. What you put between your body and the frozen earth. I told you that man sat on cold ground. Let me tell you what cold ground does. The ground in deep winter is not neutral. It is not just a place to sit. It is a thief with an endless appetite, and it will pull the heat out of your body through the seat of your pants faster and steadier than the wind pulls it off your back. Because the wind at least comes and goes, and the ground never lets up. Never. Not for 1 second the whole night. You can have a roaring fire in front of you, and if your backside is planted on frozen earth or packed snow, you are pouring your life straight down into the ground, and the fire can't put it back fast enough, and you will get cold from the bottom up and never understand why. Because your face is warm, and your face is doing your thinking. So the second layer is this. You get up off the ground. You put a thick, dry, dead air layer between your body and the earth. Boughs, a heap of dry spruce laid deep. Bark, a log to sit on. Your pack, dry grass, anything that traps still air and breaks that endless downward theft. The old hands would cut a great pile of evergreen boughs and build a bed of it a foot deep or more before they'd think about lying down. And a man who didn't know better would look at that and think it was for softness, for comfort. And it was never about comfort. It was about not dying. A foot of dry boughs between you and the frozen ground is worth more than an armful of wood on the fire, and it costs you nothing but the time to cut it. The modern man, he'll spend an hour fussing with his fire, and he'll sit right down on the cold ground to do it, and he'll never once think that the ground he's ignoring is the thing that's going to take him. Third layer. And this one feels like cheating once it's in your hands, the way the best old tricks always do. It's the reflector, the wall, the thing you put at your back, and the thing you put behind the fire. I told you an open fire throws its heat in a line, and half of it sails off into the dark and is lost forever. Well, you don't have to let it. You build a wall of logs, a wall of stacked stone, a bank of snow packed hard, a slab of bark, a shelf of rock, a deadfall. You put a solid face behind that fire, and that face catches the heat that would have flown off into nothing, and it throws it back at you. And you put a second wall, or you put your shelter at your own back, so the heat coming toward you and the heat bouncing off the reflector gets caught between the two and pools around your body instead of streaming past you into the night. Now you've made the place I told you about. Fire in the middle, reflector behind the fire pushing the lost half back to you. Wall or bank or shelter at your own back, catching the heat and stopping the wind from stealing it off you and stopping the cold sky from pulling it up and away. And you, up off the ground on a deep, dry bed, sitting in a pocket of trapped, folded, doubled heat. That is a warm man who will not freeze. That is the difference between a fire that saves you and a fire that watches you die. And every piece of it, the wall, the bank, the bed, is free. It's stone and snow and dead wood and the sweat of building it. The whole secret is in the labor the freezing man wouldn't do because his fire felt like enough. The fourth layer is the one that sounds like madness, and it's the one I most need you to hear, because it's the one that runs hardest against everything your cold, frightened body will scream at you to do. When the cold is bad and getting worse, you do not pile on more fire. You build a smaller fire, and you get closer to it, inside a tighter space. I'll say it again because everything in you fights it. A smaller fire, closer, in a smaller trapped space, beats a great roaring bonfire every time on a killing night. The man who's scared of the cold builds a huge fire, and a huge fire has to be sat far back from, and the heat off a fire falls away so fast with distance that a man sitting 8 feet from a bonfire is barely warmer than a man sitting 8 feet from a candle. He burns through his whole woodpile in a night of terror, and he's cold the whole time. And come the dark hours when the wood's gone, he's got nothing left and no strength left to gather more. And that's when it takes him. The man who lives builds a modest fire he can sit right up on, in a small tight space that holds the heat. And he tends it slow and steady through the whole night. And he outlasts the cold instead of trying to overpower it. You do not beat the cold with a bigger fire. You beat it with a smaller world. Now, circle back with me to the thing I made you carry all this way, how a warm man freezes. Here's the whole of it, laid out plain, and once you see it, the rest locks in behind it like a door swinging shut. A man's body is bleeding heat every second he's out in the cold, off every surface, into the wind, into the ground, up into the sky. That's just physics, and it never stops. A fire pushes heat back into you, but only into the side facing it, and only the fraction that doesn't fly off into the dark. So a man sitting at an open fire on cold ground with the wind at his back is losing heat from 4 directions and gaining it back on 1. And the 1 is warm enough and loud enough that it drowns out the 4. His warm face reports to his brain, and his brain, which is itself starting to chill, believes the report. His back cools, his seat cools, his core starts to slip, and the falling core reaches up into his mind and takes the very tool he'd need to notice the danger, his judgment, his fear, his will to get up and fix the situation. The colder he gets, the calmer he feels. The closer death comes, the more the whole thing feels like rest. So he sits. He feels warm. He feels fine. He feels, right at the end, like everything is soft and good and he'll just close his eyes a moment. And the fire, that faithful thing he trusted with his whole life, keeps burning cheerfully 3 feet away, warming a dead man's face until the last stick is gone. That is how a warm man freezes. Not from too little fire, from trusting the fire to do the part of the job that was always, only, his. The cruelest turn in it, the part that makes it a true mountain story, and not just a lesson, is the same one that runs through all the hard country wisdom. The night you need every one of these tricks the most, the coldest, wickedest, windiest night of the whole winter, is the exact night you're least able to think clearly enough to do them, because that's the night the cold gets into your judgment fastest and hardest. The worse it gets, the less able you are to save yourself, and the more the whole situation lies to you that you don't need saving. That's the country putting the question to you, and it doesn't ask twice. You're wondering by now why nobody told you this, why it isn't just common knowledge drilled into everybody the way it once was. And the answer's got no conspiracy in it. It's quiet, and it's true, and it comes down to the same thing it always does, which is that a piece of hard-won knowing only stays alive as long as people need it. And the day the furnace came on in the house, and the wall thermostat clicked, and heat came up out of the floor for the price of a switch, nobody needed to know how to sit by a fire and not die anymore. So the knowing started to go. And nobody pays to remember a rule they'll never have to use. But it got worse than just forgetting, and this is the part that ought to sit you up straight. The whole trade that grew up around the outdoors took the truth and turned it inside out and sold it back to you. And they sold you the fire. Look at it. Every picture they put in front of you of a man surviving the cold, every ad, every catalog, every show, it's a man and a big, beautiful open fire and nothing else. The fire is the hero. The fire is the whole answer. Buy the fire starter. Buy the flashy flint. Buy the axe to split the wood for the great roaring blaze. They sell you the flame because the flame is a thing they can put in a box and sell you. And they say nothing about the wall and the bed and the small tight space and the getting up off the ground because there's no product in it. It's just labor and knowing, and you can't put labor and knowing in a box with a price on it. So they hand you, smiling, the one piece of this, the fire that a man can have plenty of and still freeze to death holding. And they leave out the free part, the part that actually saves you. Because the free part doesn't sell. Let me be straight with you now, the way I'd want it given to me, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. This is not likely to be you. You're not going to freeze to death this winter. Not with a furnace humming and a roof over you and a road out front. To die of this, you'd have to be caught out, truly out, stranded and alone in real cold, with the wind up and the dark coming down, the way a hunter turned around gets caught, or a man whose truck died on the wrong road, or a traveler who trusted the weather 1 hour too long. I won't tell you it's coming for you, but I'll tell you every man it ever came for felt exactly as safe as you feel right now, sitting warm and listening, right up until the night it had him. And the ones it took were the ones who were certain the fire would be enough. It was never the men who feared the cold that died sitting up. It was the men who trusted the fire. And I won't skip the hard proof, because this is written down better than most of the old knowing ever got written. The people who study how the cold kills, the search and rescue outfits, the military mountain schools, the doctors who've pulled men back from the edge of freezing, they'll all tell you the same 3 things. And they'll tell you the third one is what gets people. First, most of your heat is lost to the ground and to the wind, not to the air, which is why the bed and the wall matter more than the flame. Second, the cold takes your judgment before it takes your body, so a freezing man is the last man on earth able to tell he's freezing. And third, the one that names our dead man exactly. Some of the worst cold deaths are found near heat, near fires, near shelter, because the warmth on one side masked the killing loss on the other, and the man never fixed the leak because the fire told him there wasn't one. That's not a campfire tale. That's in the record, written by people whose whole job is dragging folks back from where that man went. So here's how you carry it, not as fear, but as a plain way of doing. When the cold means business, you don't warm yourself, you warm a space and get in it. You get up off the ground first, before anything, on a deep, dry bed, because the ground is the thief that never rests. You build a wall behind the fire to throw the lost heat back, and you put something solid at your own back to catch it and break the wind. You build the fire small and sit close and tend it slow, and you never trust a big blaze to do what a tight space does better. And above all of it, you remember that the warm side of you is a liar on a cold night. And the moment you start to feel calm and sleepy and content out in the deep cold is the exact moment to be most afraid, because that feeling is not safety. That feeling is the cold in your mind doing its quiet work. None of it costs a dime. The whole thing that saves your life is stone and snow and dead boughs, and the labor the freezing man was too comfortable to do. Maybe that's the lesson, bigger than fire and bigger than winter. That man didn't die because the night was cruel. The night was only ever just the night. He died because he was certain the fire was enough, certain that warm meant safe, certain a warm face told the truth about a cold body. The cold never takes the humble man half as fast as it takes the sure one. The humble man keeps checking his back. The sure man watches the flame and smiles. And the old hands, the ones who walked out every spring, they feared their own certainty more than they ever feared the cold. And that's the thing I'd hand you ahead of any trick I've given you tonight. So here's the whole of it, small enough to carry and free as the snow. Don't warm yourself, warm a space. Get off the ground before you do anything else. Wall the fire behind and shelter yourself behind, and trap the heat between. Build it small and sit close and tend it slow. And never once believe the warm side of your face over the cold truth of your back. Do that much, and the country can send its hardest, blackest, most murderous nights straight down the ridge at you, and you'll still be there to see the sun come up over it. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this one plain. Somewhere back in your own family, there was a man or a woman who knew how to stay warm without a wall switch to do it for them. Grew up with a wood stove, a cold farmhouse, a way of banking a fire for the night. Tell me down in the comments the one thing they knew about the cold that the rest of us have gone and forgotten. Because I want it kept. And the only place it lives now is in what we can pull back up out of memory before it's gone for good. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that turns everything you've been told clean on its head. It's about shelter, and it runs dead against your every instinct. The rule is this. The bigger and grander and sturdier you build your shelter against the cold, the faster it can kill you. And the smallest, meanest, most cramped little hole you can crawl into is the one that saves your life. I'll show you why the size of the space you sleep in matters more than the strength of the walls around it, and why the men who built themselves fine, big cabins sometimes froze, while the men who dug in small lived to laugh about it. Until then, take care of your fire, and don't ever let its warm face fool you into forgetting your cold back.